After 19 years, Billionaire discovers beggar girl is his daughter. This will leave you in tears. He came from a small village where life was humble, and people measured success not by wealth but by character. From a young age, he learned the value of hard work and honesty. Rajiv's father, a retired school teacher, would often tell him, "Son, wealth can be lost, but respect and trust stay with you forever." Those words stayed with Rajiv throughout his life. After completing his basic education, Rajiv moved to the city in search of work. The city was a completely different world. Tall buildings that touched the sky, streets always busy with cars and buses, and people constantly in a hurry. At first, he found it overwhelming. Every day, he would walk miles in the scorching sun or pouring rain, looking for small jobs that could help him survive. He did not have many skills beyond honesty, dedication, and a strong sense of responsibility, but he had a heart full of determination. It was during this difficult period that Rajiv met a friend named Suresh, who worked in security services. Suresh suggested that Rajiv try to become a gatekeeper or security guard in a wealthy household. "You are honest, careful, and you never complain. You will be perfect for the job," Suresh said. Rajiv hesitated at first. He did not want a job that might seem ordinary or unnoticed, but Suresh reminded him that loyalty and consistency could build a life better than he imagined. "Sometimes the smallest doors lead to the biggest houses," Suresh said with a smile. Rajiv applied for several positions but did not get a positive response for weeks. Many employers wanted young men who could run errands, manage technology, or appear impressive, but Rajiv's strength was simple honesty and attention to detail. Finally, one day, he got a call from the office of Arjun Mehta, a wealthy industrialist known for his luxurious lifestyle and business empire. They needed someone to manage the main gate of their mansion, a role that seemed simple but required immense trust. Rajiv could hardly believe it. He was called for an interview at the Mehta residence. The first time Rajiv saw the mansion, he was speechless. The walls were painted in elegant cream and gold, fountains sparkled in the sunlight, and the gardens were filled with exotic flowers. The driveway stretched longer than anything Rajiv had ever seen, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. He could hardly imagine that he would one day work there every single day. Despite the grandeur, Rajiv felt a strange calm. It was as if he belonged there not because of wealth, but because he was ready to serve with honesty and dedication. The interview was brief. Mr. Arjun Mehta, a tall man in his early 50s with a serious face but kind eyes, asked Rajiv about his work experience, honesty, and ability to handle responsibility. Rajiv answered simply, speaking from the heart. "Sir, I may not have fancy skills, but I never fail in my duties. I treat everyone with respect and I can be trusted completely," he said. Arjun Mehta, who was used to evaluating people carefully, nodded. Something about Rajiv's sincerity impressed him. A week later, Rajiv received the call. He was hired. Rajiv's first day at the mansion was unforgettable. He arrived before sunrise, dressed neatly in the uniform provided, and stood by the main gate, feeling both nervous and proud. The mansion was waking up slowly, with the first rays of sunlight hitting the marble floors and shining through the windows. Rajiv observed every detail, the position of the flower pots, the gates, the way the staff moved. He knew that being a gatekeeper was not just about opening and closing the gate. It was about being the first person to greet guests, the protector of the property, and a person the family could trust completely. Over the next few months, Rajiv settled into his role. He learned every routine of the Mehta family. He knew when Mrs. Mehta liked her morning tea in the garden, when the children needed their school transport, and when Mr. Mehta expected privacy in his study. Rajiv was careful to remain respectful yet attentive. He developed a natural rhythm with the household, and soon, everyone began to trust him completely. His loyalty and honesty were noticed not just by the family, but also by other staff members. Rajiv did not boast or demand recognition. He quietly fulfilled every duty, often going beyond what was required. 10 years passed like this, almost unnoticed. But those years built an unspoken bond between Rajiv and the Mehta family. The children grew up. The mansion witnessed birthdays, festivals, and family gatherings, and Rajiv was always there, standing silently at the gate, smiling politely, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. Neighbors and friends of the family often commented on Rajiv's dedication. "A man like him is rare," they would say, yet Rajiv never sought praise. For him, loyalty and duty were rewards enough. Rajiv's life outside the mansion remained simple. He lived in a small rented room nearby, saved carefully, and sent money to his family back in his village. Every evening after finishing his shift, he would walk home through the bustling streets, watching people, thinking about life and feeling content in small joys, like the smell of street food, children playing, or the sunset behind the city skyline. Rajiv never thought about quitting or looking for another job. This job, no matter how humble it seemed, gave him purpose and dignity. He also developed a quiet friendship with some of the staff at the mansion. The gardener, the cook, and a few others often shared stories with him during breaks. Rajiv's calm presence made people comfortable. Even the youngest child in the Mehta family would run to him with small problems, knowing he would listen patiently. Rajiv was more than a gatekeeper. He was a guide, a protector, and in many ways, a silent supporter of the family's happiness. Despite the wealth and luxury around him, Rajiv never felt jealous or disconnected from his roots. He remembered his father's words constantly and took pride in the simple fact that he could serve with honesty. Many times, when he saw people arriving at the mansion with arrogance or entitlement, he treated them with quiet politeness, never losing his composure. His life was simple, predictable, and yet meaningful. However, as peaceful as those 10 years seemed, there were small signs that change could come. Occasionally, he overheard conversations about restructuring, management changes, or new staff joining. Rajiv never worried. He believed that loyalty and dedication would always matter. He thought of himself as part of the family, not just an employee. The mansion had become a second home, the family had become second family, and he was proud to stand by them every day. One evening, after 10 years of service, Rajiv was standing at his usual spot, watching the sunset paint the mansion walls in golden light. He felt a deep satisfaction, thinking of all the mornings he had arrived early, the evenings he had stayed late, and the countless little moments where his careful attention had kept the mansion running smoothly. He did not know that this evening would be unlike any other. Something was about to happen that would test his strength, his patience, and the life he had built quietly over a decade. But in that moment, Rajiv only felt peace. He was unaware that the very people he had served so faithfully might one day turn their backs on him. He did not suspect that the comfort of routine, trust, and loyalty could be disrupted in an instant. And yet, even if the world turned unexpectedly, his integrity, honesty, and dedication would remain unshaken, the very qualities that had defined his life. The morning started like any other. Rajiv arrived at the mansion before sunrise, carrying his neat uniform and a small thermos of tea. The birds were singing, and a soft mist covered the gardens. Everything seemed peaceful, and Rajiv greeted the other staff with his usual calm smile. For 10 years, these mornings had been almost identical, and Rajiv had grown to love the rhythm of his life. But that day, the routine would be broken, and his life would take an unexpected turn. As he approached the main gate, he noticed a new tension in the air. The usual laughter of the security team was absent, replaced by quiet murmurs and uneasy glances. Rajiv shook his head slightly, telling himself that perhaps he was imagining things. After all, the mansion was a busy place, and sometimes even the calmest mornings had moments of tension. But when he reached the security office, he saw Mr. Arjun Mehta waiting for him, a serious expression on his face. "Rajiv," Arjun said without preamble, his voice calm but firm, "please come inside." Rajiv's heart skipped a beat. He had never been summoned like this before. Usually, Arjun's interactions were polite, respectful, and professional, but never personal in a way that made an employee anxious. Rajiv followed him silently, trying to read the expression on his employer's face. The study was quiet, the sunlight falling softly on the polished wooden floor, and Rajiv noticed how even the familiar surroundings felt different that morning. "Sit down," Arjun said, motioning to a chair opposite his desk. Rajiv obeyed, his hands resting on his knees. He could feel a strange tension building in the room. Then, in a calm but direct voice, Arjun said, "Rajiv, I'm afraid we have to let you go." For a moment, Rajiv did not respond. His mind froze. He had served this family faithfully for 10 years. He had stood in rain and scorching sun, watched over their home, protected their property, and supported their children. He had celebrated their birthdays, their festivals, and countless small victories alongside them. How could this be happening? "Excuse me, sir?" he asked carefully, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are restructuring the household," Arjun explained, his tone polite but final. "Your services are no longer required." Rajiv sat in silence, his mind struggling to process the words. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. The mansion, which had been his world for a decade, suddenly seemed distant and unfamiliar. Memories flashed through his mind, every early morning, every rainy evening, every smile from the children, every nod of approval from Arjun himself. All of it seemed meaningless now. I don't understand," Rajiv managed to say. "I have served faithfully for 10 years. I have never missed a day. I have always been loyal." Arjun looked at him, his eyes calm but unyielding. "We appreciate your service, Rajiv, but this decision is final. You will be given your dues, of course, but your position is no longer available." Rajiv nodded slowly, though inside, a storm of emotions raged. He felt disbelief, sorrow, anger, and confusion all at once. For a decade, he had given everything he had to the family, and now, without warning, he was being pushed aside. He wanted to argue, to plead, to remind them of his loyalty, but he also knew that nothing he said would change the decision. Arjun had spoken, and it was final. He returned to his quarters later that day, carrying only a small bag of personal belongings. Each step felt heavier than the last. The streets he had walked so many times now felt unfamiliar, as if the city itself had changed. Rajiv could not help but replay the past 10 years in his mind, questioning what loyalty truly meant. Had he misunderstood his place in the family? Had he given too much, expecting gratitude in return? The questions were endless, and yet no answers came. Rajiv's family in the village noticed his silence immediately. When he called home that evening, his voice was quiet, weighed down by the shock he could not fully explain. His daughter asked, "Papa, are you okay? Did something happen?" And Rajiv struggled to find words. Everything is fine," he said finally, though he knew it was a lie. The truth was that his world had shifted in a way he could not control. Word spread quickly among neighbors and friends about what had happened. Many were shocked. How could a man who had served so faithfully, without complaint, without ever causing trouble, be dismissed so abruptly? Some suggested it was unfair, while others whispered that wealth often blinds people to loyalty and humanity. Rajiv listened quietly to these conversations, but he felt distant. The mansion had been a part of his identity, and now that it was gone, he felt as if a part of himself had been stripped away. In the days that followed, Rajiv tried to maintain his routine. He woke early, walked the streets, helped a few friends, and tried to keep busy. But the emptiness lingered. The mornings no longer carried the sense of purpose they once had. The streets he passed were filled with people hurrying to work, yet Rajiv felt invisible, as if he no longer belonged anywhere. Every evening when he returned to his small rented room, he would sit quietly, reflecting on the sudden loss. He had given everything to a family that now seemed indifferent, and the sense of betrayal weighed heavily on him. Despite the sorrow, Rajiv did not give in to despair. He had learned resilience in his village, and he knew that life would not stop because one chapter had ended. Slowly, he began looking for ways to regain a sense of purpose. He visited nearby markets, spoke with friends, and observed the city around him with new eyes. For the first time in 10 years, he realized that he had skills and qualities that were not tied to the mansion or the Mehta family. His honesty, dedication, and experience were valuable, and he could use them to build a new path. One day, while walking through a busy street, he noticed a small community center where young men gathered for training and mentorship. An idea formed in his mind. If he could help them, teach them discipline, responsibility, and the value of honesty, he could regain a sense of purpose. He approached the center's coordinator, explained his experience, and offered to help organize safety and security training sessions. The coordinator welcomed him warmly, impressed by his sincerity and dedication. For the first time since losing his job, Rajiv felt a spark of hope. Meanwhile, people who had known him from the mansion began to reach out. Former colleagues, neighbors, and even some friends of the Mehta family expressed concern. "Rajiv, you deserve so much better," they would say. These small gestures reminded him that his worth was not determined by one family or one job. Loyalty and integrity were not meaningless. They were qualities that would always open new doors, even if not immediately apparent. However, Rajiv could not deny the sting of betrayal. Nights were the hardest. He would lie awake, thinking about the mornings he had spent guarding the gate, the trust he had built, and the sudden dismissal that had changed everything. He struggled with the question, why do people sometimes forget loyalty? Why is honesty often overlooked in the pursuit of wealth or convenience? These questions did not have easy answers, and yet Rajiv refused to let bitterness consume him. Instead, he channeled his energy into helping others. At the community center, he trained young men in basic security, taught them how to be responsible, and shared life lessons from his own experiences. Slowly, he began to see the impact he could have outside the walls of the mansion. His reputation as a man of integrity spread, and people began seeking his guidance not because he had been wealthy, but because he was trustworthy, disciplined, and kind. Even as he rebuilt his life, Rajiv carried the memory of the mansion with him, not with anger but with reflection. He realized that his years there had shaped him, taught him patience, and given him a sense of purpose. The mansion had been a chapter in his life, but it was not the whole story. What mattered was how he responded to adversity, how he maintained dignity, and how he continued to live with honesty and compassion. One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Rajiv sat on a small bench outside the community center. He watched children playing, neighbors greeting each other, and the simple life unfolding around him. A sense of peace washed over him. He understood now that being valued was not about serving the wealthy or holding a prestigious position. It was about living with integrity, helping others, and staying true to oneself. The mansion might have rejected him, but life had not. Opportunities existed everywhere for those willing to see them, and Rajiv was ready to embrace them. Even in sorrow, there was hope. Even in loss, there was the possibility of growth. Rajiv's story, though marked by betrayal and pain, was also a story of resilience, courage, and quiet strength. He had faced the unexpected, endured the injustice, and now stood at the beginning of a new chapter. The world might not always recognize loyalty immediately, but Rajiv knew that a life lived with honesty, integrity, and dedication would always leave a lasting mark. And so, as the city lights flickered on, Rajiv smiled for the first time in many days. He did not know what the future held, but he was ready. Ready to rise, ready to serve again, not for wealth, not for recognition, but for the simple, unshakable values that had always guided him. The chapter of loss had begun, but it was only the beginning of a story that would inspire, move, and teach the people who witnessed it. After weeks of feeling lost and uncertain, Rajiv Kumar slowly began to realize that life, despite its harsh twists, still offered opportunities. For those willing to see them. His days at the community center had begun to give him purpose, but there was a deeper desire inside him, a need to rebuild not just his routine, but his self-respect and confidence. For 10 years, he had poured his loyalty and energy into the Mehta mansion, and though the family had moved on, Rajiv knew that his dedication, discipline, and integrity were qualities that could never be taken away. Each morning, Rajiv would rise early, as he had for so many years, and walk the quiet streets of the city. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, reminding him that each day was a chance to begin anew. He would stop by small tea stalls, greet the shopkeepers, and listen to the chatter of the neighborhood. These small interactions, simple as they were, brought him comfort. They reminded him that life went on, even when it seemed to have turned against him. At the community center, Rajiv had become a mentor to a group of young men who were learning about responsibility, discipline, and the basics of security and safety. Many of them came from difficult backgrounds, struggling with poverty, family problems, or lack of direction. Rajiv's calm presence and quiet authority had a profound impact on them. He would often tell them stories from his own life, about growing up in a small village, walking miles to find work, and eventually earning the trust of a wealthy family. He emphasized the value of honesty, patience, and integrity, teaching them that these qualities were far more important than money or status. One day, as Rajiv was guiding the young men through a training exercise in the center's courtyard, he noticed a man watching from the edge of the compound. The man was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with an air of confidence. After the session ended, the man approached Rajiv and introduced himself. "Hello, my name is Vikram Shah," he said, extending his hand. "I run a private security company, and I've heard about the excellent work you've been doing here." Rajiv was polite but cautious. "Thank you, sir," he replied. "I am just trying to help these young men learn responsibility and discipline." Vikram smiled. "That's admirable, but your experience goes far beyond this. 10 years managing security at one of the largest private residences in the city is no small achievement. I'd like to offer you a position in my company. Not just as a guard, but as a manager, someone who can train staff, oversee operations, and ensure discipline across multiple sites. I believe your skills and integrity would be invaluable to us." Rajiv was stunned. He had never imagined that a sudden dismissal from the Mehta mansion would lead to such an opportunity. At first, he hesitated, unsure if he deserved it or if he could take on such a responsibility. But as he thought about the years of dedication, the countless lessons learned, and the strength he had built within himself, he realized that this was the chance he had been waiting for. I would be honored, sir," he said finally, shaking Vikram's hand. The transition was not easy. Rajiv had grown accustomed to the predictable rhythm of life at the mansion, and now he was stepping into a world of new responsibilities, managing multiple teams, dealing with clients, and ensuring that every operation ran smoothly. There were long hours, unexpected challenges, and moments when he doubted himself. But he drew strength from his experience, from the lessons he had learned about patience, perseverance, and the quiet power of honesty. Within months, Rajiv began to see the results of his efforts. Staff under his supervision were disciplined, confident, and motivated. Clients appreciated his attention to detail and the calm authority with which he handled problems. Rajiv's reputation as a man of integrity spread quickly. Word of his work reached other business owners, and soon he was being invited to consult on security projects, offer training sessions, and mentor new teams. For the first time in months, Rajiv felt a renewed sense of pride and accomplishment. But the most meaningful change was not in his professional success. It was in his sense of self-worth. Rajiv realized that being dismissed from the Mehta mansion, though painful, had opened doors he would never have imagined. He had discovered that life was not defined by one job, one family, or one chapter. True value came from the qualities he carried within himself: honesty, dedication, and the courage to keep moving forward despite adversity. He also began to notice the ripple effect of his work. The young men at the community center were thriving, some finding jobs, others returning to school, all of them inspired by Rajiv's example. He had become a symbol of resilience, showing them that setbacks were not the end of the road, but rather opportunities to grow stronger and wiser. Parents and teachers from the neighborhood would come to thank him, praising his patience, guidance, and unwavering commitment to helping others. Each message of gratitude reminded Rajiv that his efforts mattered, that he was making a real difference. One afternoon, Rajiv received a surprising phone call. It was from a distant relative of the Mehta family, someone who had been aware of his dismissal. "Rajiv, I don't know if you want to hear this," the voice said hesitantly, "but news has reached the family about your work. They are impressed. They wanted to know how you are doing and to tell you that they regret how things were handled." Rajiv listened quietly, feeling a mix of emotions. There was no bitterness in his voice, no demand for apologies. Instead, he spoke with calm dignity. "I am doing well," he said. "I have found a new purpose and a new path. I am grateful for the lessons I learned even in difficult times." Hearing this, the relative paused, as if struck by Rajiv's grace and composure. "You are truly remarkable, Rajiv. You have turned a painful experience into something inspiring." This moment reinforced Rajiv's belief that life was not about holding onto anger or resentment. It was about moving forward with integrity, learning from experiences, and finding ways to create value, no matter the circumstances. The world had tried to push him down, but he had risen stronger than ever. As months turned into a year, Rajiv's influence continued to grow. He was invited to speak at community events, share his story, and mentor more young men. People who once saw him as a simple gatekeeper now recognized him as a leader, a guide, and a man of remarkable character. Yet, despite the recognition, Rajiv remained humble. He never sought attention or praise. He simply focused on doing what was right, helping others, and living by the principles he had always cherished. He also found joy in small, personal moments. Walking through the city streets, he noticed the same sunrise he had admired during his years at the mansion. Children playing in the parks, neighbors greeting each other, and the simple laughter of friends reminded him that happiness was often found in life's little moments. Rajiv had learned to appreciate these small blessings, understanding that wealth or status did not determine true fulfillment. Occasionally, he thought about the Mehta mansion and the family he had served for 10 years. But his reflections were no longer filled with sorrow or anger. Instead, he remembered the lessons he had learned, the value of patience, the strength of character, and the importance of integrity. Those years, though ending in disappointment, had prepared him for the new life he was building. They had shown him that even in loss there was opportunity, and even in betrayal there was wisdom to be gained. One particularly memorable day, Rajiv received an invitation from a local business association to speak about leadership and ethics in the workplace. Standing before a hall of business owners, managers, and young professionals, he shared his journey, from a small village to serving faithfully in a wealthy household, to losing his job unexpectedly and finally finding new purpose through resilience and dedication. The audience listened intently, many nodding in agreement, some even moved to tears. Rajiv's story resonated with them because it was real, raw, and a testament to the power of character over circumstance. As he concluded his speech, Rajiv emphasized a simple truth. Life will not always treat you fairly. You may face betrayal, disappointment, and loss, but your integrity, your patience, and your courage are yours to keep. They cannot be taken away. If you hold on to these, you can turn any setback into an opportunity, any challenge into a lesson, and any ending into a new beginning. The applause was long and heartfelt, but for Rajiv, the real satisfaction came from knowing that his words might inspire someone else to keep going, to hold on to honesty and resilience, and to believe that better days were always possible. He had transformed his pain into purpose, his loss into growth, and his uncertainty into direction. Even as success came into his life, Rajiv remained grounded. He continued his work at the community center, mentoring young men and sharing life lessons. He understood that recognition and status were temporary, but the impact he could have on others was lasting. Each success story of a young man he had trained became a source of pride, a reminder that his experiences, however painful, had meaning far beyond himself. And so, Rajiv's life had shifted in a way he never expected. The shock of losing his job at the Mehta mansion, which had once felt like the end of the world, had become the beginning of a remarkable journey. Through perseverance, integrity, and quiet determination, he had turned heartbreak into opportunity, despair into hope, and rejection into recognition. Rajiv Kumar was no longer just a gatekeeper. He had become a mentor, a leader, and an inspiration to all who knew his story. The lessons of those 10 years, combined with the strength he had found in adversity, had created a man who could face any challenge with calmness, dignity, and courage. Life had tested him, but he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And as he looked ahead, Rajiv knew that no matter what the future held, he had the power to shape it, not through wealth, not through position, but through the qualities that had always defined him: honesty, loyalty, and unwavering integrity. Months had passed since Rajiv Kumar had taken his first steps into a life beyond the Mehta mansion, yet the memories of those 10 years never completely faded. He often reflected on the mornings when the gates opened under his care, the laughter of the children, the quiet nods of respect from Mr. Mehta, and the routines that had defined his life. For a long time, he had carried sorrow and disbelief over his dismissal. But now, standing in his modest office at the security company he helped build, he realized how far he had come. What had once seemed like the end of the world had become a turning point, a chapter that led him to a more meaningful life. The young men he mentored at the community center had flourished under his guidance. Many of them, who had once wandered aimlessly through life, now held steady jobs, pursued education, and developed a sense of responsibility and self-respect. Rajiv often visited them, not just as a mentor, but as a friend. He shared his own struggles, teaching them that life could be unpredictable, yet resilience, integrity, and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. Their smiles, progress, and gratitude brought him a joy far deeper than any recognition or praise he had received in his previous job. One afternoon, as Rajiv returned from a training session, he noticed an unexpected visitor waiting at his office door. It was Mr. Arjun Mehta himself, looking older and perhaps a little more reflective than Rajiv remembered. Rajiv's first reaction was a mixture of surprise and caution. He had not expected to see the man who had dismissed him so abruptly, not after all that had happened. He rose politely, ready to listen but wary of the reason for the visit. "Rajiv," Arjun began, his voice calm yet carrying a hint of hesitation, "I have been hearing about your work. Your reputation has reached us, and I wanted to see it for myself. I must admit, we made a mistake in letting you go without acknowledging your true value." Rajiv listened quietly, feeling a complex swirl of emotions. He could sense a genuine respect in Arjun's words, but there was no bitterness in him anymore. He had long moved past the pain of rejection, and now he could view the encounter with calm dignity. "Thank you, sir," he said softly. "I appreciate your words, but what matters most is not what was lost, but what I have learned and achieved since then." Arjun nodded, almost as if relieved to hear these words. He continued, "We realize that loyalty and dedication like yours are rare. I wanted to personally acknowledge that, and also to say that we respect the way you have turned a difficult situation into something remarkable. You have built not just a career, but an example for others to follow." Rajiv felt a quiet warmth in his heart. For years, he had believed that his efforts might never be recognized, that loyalty could be overlooked. But hearing these words now, he understood that life had its own way of delivering justice, not always immediately, but eventually. He realized that acknowledgement was not always necessary for one to live a meaningful life. What mattered most was the strength to continue and the courage to rise above disappointment. The visit was brief, yet it carried an emotional weight that stayed with Rajiv for days. Neighbors, colleagues, and even some of the young men from the community center who had accompanied him to meet Arjun were moved by the humility and grace with which he handled the encounter. For them, it was not just a meeting between an employee and a former employer. It was a demonstration of true character, resilience, and emotional strength. As the months continued, Rajiv's work expanded. He began consulting for multiple businesses, guiding them on security management, training, and ethics in the workplace. Each project brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to make a positive impact. He remained humble, never seeking fame or recognition, but his reputation grew. People respected him not because he had once served a wealthy family, but because he lived with honesty, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to what was right. Rajiv's life was no longer defined by the mansion, nor by the wealth of those he had once served. It was defined by the lives he touched, the lessons he shared, and the example he set for others. He had discovered a profound truth. The value of a person is not measured by their title, income, or social status, but by the integrity and compassion they carry within themselves. One evening, as he walked home through the familiar streets of the city, Rajiv noticed children playing in the park, families laughing together, and neighbors exchanging greetings. The simplicity of life, the beauty of everyday moments, reminded him of what truly mattered. He thought of his own family in the village, and the pride they must feel in knowing that despite hardships, he had built a life of purpose and meaning. He also thought about the young men he had mentored. Some had returned to school, some had started small businesses, and others had secured stable jobs. Each success story was a testament to his guidance, patience, and belief in human potential. Rajiv realized that he had created a legacy, not of wealth, but of hope, inspiration, and the transformative power of integrity. One day, a journalist approached him to write a story about his life. She wanted to capture the journey of a man who had been dismissed after years of loyalty, yet had risen to build a life that inspired countless others. Rajiv agreed, not for fame, but to share a message, that setbacks were not the end of the road, and that life always offered opportunities to those who refused to give up. The article was published and quickly gained attention. Readers were moved by Rajiv's journey, his grace in the face of betrayal, and the way he had turned adversity into a source of strength. Messages of support poured in from people across the city and even from other parts of the country. Some shared their own struggles, finding hope in Rajiv's story. Others praised his humility, resilience, and dedication to helping others. For Rajiv, the greatest reward was knowing that his experiences could inspire and uplift others. Despite all the recognition and success, Rajiv remained grounded. He continued his routine, waking early, walking through the city, mentoring young men, and maintaining simple habits that reminded him of his roots. He understood that true happiness was not in wealth, fame, or accolades, but in living with honesty, making a difference in others' lives, and finding peace within oneself. Occasionally, he would visit the Maida mansion, not as an employee, but as someone who had once been part of its story and had now created his own. He would watch the gates from a distance, remembering the mornings he had spent there, the years of service, and the lessons learned. But instead of sorrow, he felt gratitude. Those years had shaped him, taught him resilience, and prepared him for a life that was richer in meaning than he had ever imagined. The transformation in Rajiv's life was not just professional or material, it was deeply personal. He had moved from a place of pain, disappointment, and uncertainty to one of confidence, purpose, and fulfillment. His journey had taught him patience, humility, and the importance of seeing challenges as opportunities. He understood that life's tests, however difficult, were not meant to break him, but to build him into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The final chapter of Rajiv's journey was marked by a quiet, emotional celebration. The young men he had mentored organized a small gathering, inviting him to speak and share his story. As he addressed the group, Rajiv's voice was calm, but full of emotion. Life will sometimes disappoint you. People may not always recognize your worth. But if you stay true to yourself, if you remain patient, honest, and dedicated, you will find your place, and you will touch lives in ways you cannot imagine. Tears filled the eyes of many attendees. Some were moved by the hardships he had faced, others by the grace with which he overcame them. And some simply felt inspired, realizing that even ordinary people, through perseverance and integrity, could create extraordinary impact. Rajiv's story became more than a personal triumph. It became a beacon of hope for anyone who had faced betrayal, loss, or hardship. Even the Maida family learned of this gathering, and though they did not attend, they heard about the profound influence Rajiv had on the community. It was a silent acknowledgement of the man they had once dismissed, a recognition that true worth is revealed not by wealth or position, but by character, courage, and the lives one touches. As Rajiv returned home that evening, he reflected on the journey that had begun with 10 years of faithful service, followed by unexpected dismissal, and now led to inspiration, leadership, and personal fulfillment. He understood that life's trials, though painful, were opportunities in disguise. The heartbreak he had endured had pushed him toward a life filled with purpose, meaning, and the power to inspire others. In the quiet of his modest home, Rajiv felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced the storm, endured the pain, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. His journey was a testament to the human spirit, the ability to rise above betrayal, to transform adversity into opportunity, and to find joy and fulfillment through integrity, service, and perseverance. And so, the man who had once stood silently at the gate of a wealthy mansion, overlooked and unrecognized, had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and inspiration. His life reminded everyone that loyalty, honesty, and dedication were never wasted, that setbacks were temporary, and that true success lay not in wealth or status, but in character, courage, and the positive impact one leaves on the world.